Hey everybody, Coach Mark here. Before we dive into today's topic, make sure to find me over on Instagram as Coach Mark Estrillo. I offer one-to-one coaching. It's what I do full-time. The odds are very good. I would love to work with you. With that being said, let's get into it. Today's video is Chapter 4 of the Conjugate Codex. We're going to be talking all about the max effort method and intensive waves. So just for a brief recap, when we're talking about the max effort method, we're looking at the process of training with maximal or near maximal loads to develop limit strength. Train to strain, essentially. In most cases, this was done to a heavy single for the day, with the goal being you would hit somewhere between 1 to 3 total reps at or above 90% of a given variation's 1 rep max. Additionally, you might see times where you do something such as a 3 rep max on the good morning. Movements also rotated weekly to prevent overuse as well as prevent accommodation or, in layman's terms, a plateau. Now, in terms of who most influenced me in this aspect of Conjugate and Conjugate in general, Louis Simmons is obviously the biggest influence in it because he helped introduce the system to me, especially the max effort method. However, it's really important to understand some deeper nuance to the max effort method because it wasn't just hitting a random variation for a 1RM every week. The idea was you would select it specifically to address individual weaknesses, and from there, you'd often see a rotation such as going squat to deadlift and then to good morning for a 3-week rotation, and then every rotation the variations would change in thereout. Ultimately, max effort variations should be humbling. If you're routinely hitting weights that are at or well above your main lift's 1 rep maximum, then the odds are very good you're not really doing much in terms of improving overall strength, but you are certainly satisfying the ego. Now, with this in mind, let's talk about the big changes I make to the max effort method, and again, my particular take on the conjugate method. Number one being that variations are performed for 3 to 6 weeks at a time before being rotated out. I often use 3 to 8 rep maxes rather than just 1 rep maxes. Back off sets or extra volume during the ramp up phase is very much the norm. And then lastly, mechanical progressions intra wave are also extremely common. So the first big change I make, as I talked about before, is longer waves. The idea here is I like to train a movement for somewhere between 3 to 6 weeks. And the reason being, when you change out the max effort lift every week, it's been my experience you don't get enough time with it to really learn the nuance and technique, so you can't extract as much benefit from it. So for example, let's say you want to emphasize tricep strength. Something such as a close grip bench press versus bands would be a really good bog standard selection here. However, if you only do it 1 week, you're not going to give yourself enough time to get used to the movement and really feel it out. Whereas if you were to do it for 3 weeks in a row, maybe you work to a heavy triple, you could then work to that heavy triple and use that to inform week two's heavy double selection. And then after that, you've developed more skill, practice, and technique with that variation. So then in week 3, when you go for a 1 rep max, you'd have a much better grasp of how the movement moves, as well as how to load it correctly. This allows us to make better attempt selections so we can get more benefit and more skill practice. Additionally, I find that this approach strikes a really good balance between avoiding plateaus as well as having excessive variation to the point where you don't have reference and you can't really feel what's working for helping improve the main variation that you're trying to hunt down. Second change I make is I focus a lot more on multi-rep maxes, especially in the 3 to 8 rep range. And part of that is just because at day's end, this channel, this page, I'm talking a lot more about strongman and power building application. So multi-rep maxes are, in my opinion, a more natural adaptation of the max effort method. Especially if we look at strongman, it is a rep dominant sport. While 1 rep maxes certainly do appear, in general, it's going to be reps for time. So multi-rep maxes just make natural sense. These heavier repetition maximums are also going to build better strength endurance as well as positioning so you can learn how to cycle reps. So it has a lot more direct sport carryover. Whereas for the power building side of things, heavy top sets allow you to chase that big number, but muscle ostensibly is built with heavy reps versus just doing singles in the simplest of terms. For both applications, I think the extra time spent on a given variation will again allow you to extract more benefit from it, and then you're also doing more reps, so you get more total time and practice with that variation to develop the relevant attribute you're trying to extract from it. The third big change I make is focusing on ramps as well as back offsets in particular. As I've alluded to really this entire presentation, I prefer to have more volume with a given max effort variation to allow us to get more out of it. And the use of back offsets after a heavy top set works for us twofold. The heavy top set allows us to demonstrate strength as well as refine technique under strenuous load, whereas the back offsets allow us to continue to build and develop that strength and technique, and in turn, build additional muscle and strength on that given variation and in general. Really, if you look at most any powerlifting program, the use of a top set and back offs is extremely common, and it's the back off work that helps us give more stimulus to the body and drives multiple adaptations. It's the same reason you see bodybuilders generally perform multiple sets of a given movement versus just one all out set. By getting more touches with that movement, we extract more of the benefit from it and get more stimulus from it. Whereas, on the other side, if we're talking about ramp up sets, we might do something where we take multiple lower intensity ramp up sets before hitting our top set. And the reason why is this allows the lifter to hit that movement and get more practice with it on the way up. That way they can warm up more efficiently with it. This type of approach I tend to like on movements where I personally feel a little less secure, or maybe my lifter does, and it's one where they really only mentally have one or two hard sets in them. So then we can get a lot of warming up, get them in the groove, and get them into that flow state. That way by the time they hit their top set, they're ready to move on and hit the accessories really hard. The fourth change is mechanical progressions. If we have a lift that needs extra focus, using closely related variations across a multi-wave approach that builds from one to another is honestly one of my favorite tools. The mechanical progression system with max effort really circles back around to point number one, because the idea here is we are using closely related variations. So for example, if we have a lifter who shows signs of torso weakness as well as needing to improve their starting strength in the deadlift, we might do something like so, where in weeks 1 through 3, we're going to work the axle deficit deadlift to a 7, 5, and then 3 rep max. Then weeks 4 through 6, it'll just be the axle deadlift to a 5, 3, or 2 rep max. And then weeks 7 through 9, just the classic floor deadlift to a 3, 2, or 1 rep max. So by starting with this progression, what we do here is we start 2 steps away from the deadlift from the floor using both the axle and the deficit. Then we get 1 step away. Then we're just doing the competition lift, they're out. So it's 9 weeks of max effort deadlifts, but it does, shall we say, filter downwards. There's a bit of a strategy interwave, because what happens is you reset at the start of each wave, with each wave getting progressively heavier than the previous, both due to mechanical advantage because the variations are going to be more conducive to getting heavier, as well as the reduced repetitions overall. So that also helps to manage cumulative fatigue across the wave. Again, these mechanical progressions are one of my favorite ways to maximize a max effort wave if you have a lift that does need a little more special focus. On screen now are a few of my favorite simplistic sample waves for a max effort. So again, you'd use this for your main lift of the day. With the strength focus, you'll just hit a 3, 2, or 1 rep max, and then drop 15% of that heavy set and do 2 sets of 4, 2 sets of 3, or 2 sets of 2. Now the ramping one is 4 sets of 4 to 6, then 5 sets of 3 to 5, and then 6 sets of 2 to 4. You'll notice there are percentages listed there, but the idea is that would be the floor of where you're at, and you would work up with each subsequent set. This one's pretty open-ended, and I'll talk a bit more about the percentages at a later slide. The Power Builder one, you're going to hit an 8, 6, or 5 rep max, and then you'll drop 20% for a couple back off sets, 10 to 12, 8 to 10, or 6 to 8. The next one is Conjugate, lovingly named because it was inspired by Dante Trudell's dog crap training. So you'll hit your 8 rep max in week 1, drop 20% of that weight, and then perform a rest pause set. Week 2 and 3, it's a 6 or 5 rep max, still dropping 20% and performing 1 rest pause set. Now, I probably wouldn't use this with something like a squat, but for either a pressing variation or even a deadlift, if you're a strongman athlete, this would be a very fun, potent, and rather draining one, so you don't want to go nuts with it. Then there's the ramping max effort wave, where in week 1 you'll actually hit a heavy single, and then in weeks 2 through 4, what you'll do is you'll start at the percentage listed and then work up across those sets in that given rep range, with the idea being in week 4 you should be able to hit a double at or above what week 1 single was. And then last but not least is All Reliable. You'll hit a heavy set of 5 to 8, and then drop 15% and perform max quality reps. And with this one, you just stick to that 3 weeks at a time. Every week, you would either try to add weight or add reps. My general rule of thumb is once I hit 8 reps with a given weight, the next time I do it, I would just add 10 to 20 pounds, be it an upper or lower body lift. Now, these waves are a bit more unique and complicated because they do integrate in mechanical progressions as well as just being more exotic by their very nature. So, for example, we have the log skill complex wave, wherein you work up to a max complex. So in week 1, you're going to work up to your max clean, 2 Viper, 2 push press. And then in week 2, it's 1 clean, 1 Viper, 2 push press. And then in week 3, it's 1 Viper, 2 push press. Again, every week you're working up to your maximum on that given complex. The idea being this complex would really help improve your clean to push press transition. Next up is the squat control wave. So what you would do here in weeks 1 through 3, you're going to hit a 5, 4, or 3 rep max on a camber bar pause squat. Then in weeks 4 through 6, it's a 5, 3, or 2 rep max on just a standard camber bar squat. And then in weeks 7 through 9, it's a 3, 2, and 1 rep max back squat. This would be good if you're someone who feels very sloppy, they don't feel controlled in the descent on their squat. Maybe they tend to fold over a lot. This is going to teach you how to find the correct groove and really lock in your midline and torso for a more efficient bar path and finding where you need to be for an efficient, powerful squat. Next up would be the wave loading wave. That sounds kind of redundant, but anyways, the idea here is in week 1, you would do 7, 5, 3 waves. And if you're not familiar with wave loading, the idea is you take a given weight, do a set of 7, a little heavier for 5, a little heavier for 3, and then you'd repeat that 7, 5, 3 series, going a bit heavier on all 3 sets. The idea here is your second cluster of the 3 sets, the second 7, 5, 3 go around, should feel better than the first 7, 5, 3 because you're a bit more warmed up. Wave loading is a great way to add a little bit of volume, but that's probably a whole different video just because there's a lot you could discuss. But regardless, week 1, 7, 5, 3 waves. Then in week 2, 5, 3, 2 waves. And then in week 3, 3, 2, 1 waves. Then I've got the How I Bench 315 wave. This is a 15-week wave, by the way. So phase 1 is a 5, 4, 3, 2, or 1 rep max on close grip bench versus chains. Then it was close grip bench after that, and then just the plain old bench. And something I like to do with this is what I thought about doing is in that second phase, the close grip bench, what I wanted is I wanted to hit the same weight I was hitting at lockout with the close grip bench versus chains. So for example, let's say on the 1 rep max close grip bench versus chains, I hit something like 285 plus 20 in chains. That's 305 at lockout. So then in the second phase where I'm doing close grip bench, I wanted my 1RM on the close grip bench to be at or above 305. And then the final more unique wave I want to share is the cluster. I hardly know her. Max effort method. Come on, indulge me. That was clever, right? But the idea here is I actually designed this one based around the need to improve weighted pull-up strength. You'd hit a heavy 1 to 3 rep max. Then after that, you would drop 10% and do 2 max double cluster sets. So what that means is you do 2, rest 15 seconds, and you just keep repeating that process. 2, rest, 2, rest, 2, rest, until you could not do 2 repetitions. So once you did 1 rep, the set was done. Then you'd rest probably 3 to 5 minutes and do another round of those double clusters. Now, one of the big advantages of this model of max effort training where you are training a fixed variation for multiple weeks is you can implement something that I lovingly call a sanity check. And what that allows you to do is work backwards. So for example, let's say I'm doing the 3, 2, 1 wave and I want to hit 300 pounds in week 3. What I can do is work backwards from that and tell myself, okay, so it's week 1, 3 rep maxes. If I want to hit 300 in week 3, I'm going to start my 3RM attempts at 80% or 240 and work upwards from there. Ideally, I should be able to hit at least 85 to 90% of that desired 1 rep max for my 3 rep max, and that means I've passed the check. If I can't pass that sanity check, I probably need to bring my focus down just a little bit. And then in week 2, I'd want to arrive somewhere between 90 to 95% of my desired 1 rep maximum. So on screen in that little table, you'll see kind of some suggested guidelines. And remember, these are not that useful for necessarily determining a hypothetical 1 rep max, but you would use these to help determine what your first heavy set should be based upon your desired outcome. Again, these given percentages are the floor rather than a hard target when it comes to your multi-rep maxes. This is also really helpful if you've only been doing 1 rep maxes and now all of a sudden you're doing an 8 rep max. It just gives you a number to start with and you can always play with it from there. When you think about the max effort method, it is inherently auto-regulated, so RPE becomes very valuable here. Additionally, if you are using a new variation and you don't know where to start, base it off 80 to 90% of the main lift it's feeding from, such as 90% of your best bench, if you're doing a close grip bench, or maybe if you're doing a close grip Larson press, you should feed it based off of 80% of your best bench. Now, just a few final notes here that I think are worth mentioning. The value of the max effort work comes in training hard enough that rep speed involuntarily slows down. It doesn't mean you need to hit a PR every single week. That's not the desired outcome. The main thing here is training to strain. Missing reps will not make you stronger, but it certainly can slow down your progress by getting you hurt. In general, if you don't feel comfortable taking a 10 to 20 pound jump, you're probably just better off putting a pin in it there and moving on to your accessories. In general, if I am having a day where I feel pretty good, I'll take a 5-pound PR and then thereafter I might try bigger jumps, but always secure a good session. Variations should be humbling to you. If you're routinely exceeding your main list max with a variation, you're probably running, the clout chaser conjugate method. And also, don't think it just has to be barbells. You can do dumbbells, machines, even the Smith machine. And also, here are some exercises you can use if you're looking to specifically target certain muscle groups. In terms of improving a main lift, that gets a little more individual based off of where you tend to falter, but for the you power builder types, I got you. So if you're looking for quads, the narrow stance SSB squat, hack squats, 1.5 rep squats. For shoulders, the BTN press, 60-degree incline, Smith machine presses. For your chest, 30-degree inclines, be it a barbell, dumbbell, or Smith machine, weighted dips. Tricep size and strength, try the narrow grip bench press, floor press, even a JM press if your elbows can tolerate it. Go higher up on that one, by the way. If we're talking glutes and hams, the SSP good morning or a deficit stiff-legged deadlift. And if we want upper back, try a snatch grip block pull. So in a nutshell, how I look at max effort work is training to strain with constraints that force a lifter to develop a relevant attribute such as emphasizing a specific muscle or part of a lift. This differs from developmental work as it uses loading and intensity to drive adaptation versus repeated practice that you would see in the developmental effort method, which we talked about in the previous video. Overall, you want to think of max effort as how you both demonstrate and refine your ability to strain against a heavy load. The use of intensity and loading as priorities to develop muscle or positional skill necessitates that a lifter learn how to properly strain without breaking their technique. However, when breakdown does occur or when we are looking which variations are weaker, this allows us to identify potential bottlenecks and address them in subsequent waves. And then next week, we'll be going over the repetitive effort or repeated effort method model, and we'll have another guest coach speaking on how they look at conjugate. Anyways, folks, hope you enjoyed this one. I'll see you in the next one. Have a great rest of the day.